Every audiophile company says that they have the solution for professionals. Audeze, Sennheiser, AKG, Sony, Audio-Technica, yada, yada, yada. The list goes on. They all claim their headphones are perfect for music professionals. Today, we're going to take a look at Focal's version of this sub-market. This is the Focal Listen Professional, a $300 headphone that Focal promises big things for. Let's see what they actually deliver. Focal says that the Listen Pro will allow you to listen to your music, not to your headphones. They claim that this headphone is an essential work tool for music production. These headphones are purportedly, quote, perfect to evaluate the sound work quality. Still not convinced? Well, Focal adds that, quote, the sound quality and dynamics of the Listen Pro are very surprising considered that this quality is usually found on more expensive items, end quote. Focal promises that their driver, especially designed for this headphone, will reproduce every single detail in the whole audio spectrum. Finally, Focal says that the Listen Pro has a, quote, lively sound and soundstage of semi-open headphones. Lots to live up to, don't you think? The Listen Pro has a unique design. The black and red color scheme stands out and might appeal to many. These headphones are made largely of thick plastic, which feels robust and sturdy. The ear cups have some horizontal and vertical movement. They fold into the headband, but do not lay flat. The ear pads are made of microfiber, which Focal says will provide a more linear bass response. The padding seems to be memory foam. The ear pads have a traditional attachment method. You can freely replace these with any others that might fit the shape of the ear cups. The headband padding is essentially silicone with an air gap. When you touch it with your fingers, it feels stiff and not particularly comfortable, but it is smooth and should not snag your hair. The Listen Pro comes with a large, sturdy hardshell case. You get two sets of cables, one short and the other a longer coiled cable. Unfortunately, Focal does not provide a set of spare ear pads. As for comfort, and this is going to be an issue for some people, the Listen Pro has a rather tight clamp. However, the thick ear pads mitigate discomfort around the ears. The headband causes pressure points on the top of the head, but it never became painful to me. The headphone cuts a noticeable amount of ambient noise. A radio playing on the desk will be significantly muffled, and typing on a very clicky mechanical keyboard will be less obvious. I can wear these headphones for about 2 to 3 hours before needing a break. Overall, the Listen Pro is a well-built headphone. While it uses a large dose of plastic, this is thick and robust. The fact that you can easily replace ear pads is a relief, considering a lot of companies force you into unnecessary proprietary gimmicks. I wish the Listen Pro came with spare ear pads, but the rest of the accessories are quite good. Comfort will pose a problem for anyone who does not like a tight clamp. To test the Listen Pro, I used it with various devices. This includes the RME 80i2 DAC, Burson 3XR, Lotu PAW 6000, and EcoZerta ITM03. I used the stock accessories and listened to my test playlist on Amazon Music HD. The Listen Pro is easy to drive. A simple dongle DAC is plenty. My test suggests that the Listen Pro has close to neutral bass response. In Mountains by Hans Zimmer, there's a rumble from the beginning, which builds into a crescendo. The Listen presented this detail. The rumble was as loud as what I heard on the neutral Olo S4X. Transients was similar between the two. When the crescendo hit, the Listen made the organ meld with the other instruments. The rolling thunder effect was audible, but did not overwhelm the other elements. When the vocals chimed in, they rose from the background until they were one step ahead of the instruments. In Conquer by Overwork, there's a rolling marble sound at the beginning. This pans from right to left to center. The Listen presented this sound and the panning. There are multiple drums in this track, and the Listen rendered them all similarly. In other words, the various drums all had hard impact, and each drum strike melded with the next. Comparing between the Listen and S4X, the S4X had a bit more separation and clarity among the drum strikes. I listened to several hip-hop songs including Pure Water, New Patek, Reel It In, and Uproar. On each occasion, the Listen easily presented the sub-bass and it did not appear to emphasize it. The subwoofer always sounded like it was at the other end of a medium-sized room. The vocals were about 2 steps ahead of the instruments and retained their sparkle. The drums were louder than the sub-bass. I listened to my Sicario playlist. I used these tracks to determine if there's any audible bass distortion. Traversing from low to high volumes, I could not hear any distortion. Overall, the Listen Pro appears to have close to neutral bass. Sub-bass may have a very marginal roll-off. Mic tests indicate that the Listen Pro has slightly forward mids and marginally sibilant vocals. In Orla Gartland's Why Am I Like This, there is natural vocal grain and sibilance mixed into the track. The Listen presented and very slightly emphasized both. This was obvious when I compared the Listen against the more neutral Aventone Planar. The Listen sibilance push, however, was similar to what I heard on the audeze 4X. The Listen, without doubt, had considerably less sibilance emphasis than the HD 560S. Orla's voice was 2 steps ahead of the instruments. The drums were louder than the other instruments, but did not drown out the vocals. The audeze 4X rendered a bit more separation among all the instruments. In Want You Back by Haim, the Listen again showed that it slightly emphasizes vocal sibilance. This was similar to what I heard on the audeze 4X, if maybe slightly less. At 8 seconds into the track, the primary singer says the word "we" and drags it out, making it sound gravelly. The Listen rendered this detail. There are 2 backup vocalists, one in either channel. The Listen initially presented all 3 vocalists clearly with their individual tonalities. However, when the instruments played at maximum, the backup vocalists melded into one voice. The drums, bass, guitar, and piano all melded. The vocals remained 2 steps ahead of the other elements. In Superposition by Young the Giant, the Listen presented the ukulele, drums, and bass. All instruments melded their notes together, only slightly more than what I heard on the audeze 4X. The primary male vocalist was 2 steps ahead of the instruments. His vocal sibilance was not emphasized. There's a backup vocalist whose voice is layered beneath the primaries. Most headphones cannot reveal this subtle detail, and the Listen could not either. Between 1 minute and 10 and 1 minute and 20 seconds, there are sharp intakes of breaths. The Listen presented this detail. Overall, the Listen Pro seems to have slightly forward mids. Female vocalists will receive a marginal emphasis in vocal sibilance and grain. There's about average clarity in this region. Mic tests indicate that the Listen Pro has close to neutral treble with a slight emphasis in the upper treble. In Skirts Over X-Wings, the Listen presented the brass and horns clearly. Their nasally signatures were easily audible. However, the higher pitched notes seemed a bit emphasized, louder than what I heard on the more neutral Aventone Planar. The S4X had about as much upper treble energy as the Listen. On the Listen, the timpani was audible in the mix, but it did not drown out the other instruments. The Listen has some width and depth, but no verticality. In other words, some instruments seemed further out into the wings, some sounded like they were deeper into the room, but no sounds came from above or below. In Flight from the City, the Listen made the piano sound like it was about 5 feet away. Its bassy notes melded with each other. The S4X was a bit clearer in this regard. On the Listen, the cello was as loud as the piano. Both instruments melded their tonalities. I heard the pops and sizzles and electric buzzing effects, the creaking of wood on the pianist's bench, and the shifting of the cello's weight. In Take 5 by the Dave Brubeck Quartet, the Listen rendered the piano in the right, drums to the left, saxophone center, and bass 1 step behind. All instruments melded their tonalities, but not seemed veiled in the mix. The cymbals were almost as loud as the saxophone. The saxophone's higher-pitched notes were a bit louder, more energetic than what I heard on the Aventone Planar, but a little quieter than what I heard on the audeze 4X. The cymbals are struck in different positions, which should result in varying tonalities. The Listen made each cymbal strike sound the same. Overall, the Listen Pro seems to have a fairly neutral treble response until the upper treble, where there is a marginal upward deviation. No instruments are harsh or piercing. Focal promises that the Listen Pro will render every single detail. This is quite the guarantee, considering we can actually comparatively test this claim. Sadly, Focal's marketing is inflated and far off the mark. The Listen does indeed provide detail, but no more than what you'd find among a large number of audiophile headphones. Never once did I hear the type of detail, clarity, or precision placement that I can perceive on headphones like the HD800S or the Austrian Audio Hi-X55 or X65. Creaking of wood, shifting of a cello's weight, sharp intakes of breaths, multiple vocalists, twangs of guitar strings, nasally signatures of brass and horns, these types of details are clear, but more subtle or minute or layered details are either not clear or lost altogether. For a more quantitative test, I used the song New Light by Kazuki. This track has layers of details, including the sound of children playing, wind, rustling of grass, synth, piano, and footsteps. I count the number of steps I can hear in the first 60 seconds. The Sennheiser HD800S presents 22 footsteps. The Focal Clear, 18. The Austrian Audio Hi-X65 presents 16 to 17 footsteps. The Hi-X55 presents 16. The Hi-X15 and X25 BT each present 13 to 14 footsteps. The hifi Mansandara, Avantone Planar, Sivka Phoenix, and Beardemic DT1990 present 10 to 11. The Monolith M1070, M1570, Sivka Robin, and Ultrazone Pro 1480i all provide 8 to 9. The audeze LCD2 Closed and LCD2 Classic each provide 7 to 8. The older M1060C provides 7. The audeze LCD1 and HD6XX present 6 to 7 footsteps. The Neumann NDH20 presents 5 to 6 footsteps. And the Listen Pro rendered 7 clear footsteps. On my scale of detail retrieval, the HD6XX and LCD1 are the average performers. Any headphone that provides more or less detail is judged accordingly. So, the NDH20 would be considered as below average and the hifi Mansandara as above average. Here, based on this scale, I think the Listen Pro has average detail retrieval. Focal says that the Listen Pro renders Soundstage similar to a semi-open back headphone. I extensively use the Listen and can vouch that this promise is true, as long as the semi-open back headphone we are using as the standard is entirely closed back. Closed back headphones do not need to be claustrophobic. In fact, there is a spectrum of soundstage. Some closed back headphones have soundstage as wide as open back headphones, and even open back headphones have varying amounts of soundstage. It is not fair to say that a given headphone has good or bad soundstage. You have to put it into perspective. Here, the Listen does not present wide soundstage, at least not in the typical sense. If you come from Beats or Bose headphones, then yes, you could say that the Listen is somewhat wide sounding, but compare it to other audiophile headphones and the experience is different. I have a soundstage scale. Once again, I use the HD6XX and LCD1 as my average performers. Headphones that have more or less soundstage than these two are judged accordingly. The audeze Mobius and all Beats headphones have claustrophobic soundstage. The NDH20 and ATH M60X have below average soundstage. The HD6XX and LCD1 have average soundstage. The Sivka Phoenix, Emotiva GR1, and Ultrazone Pro 1480i have average to maybe above average soundstage, depending on the particular recording. The hifi Mansandara, Avantone Planar, Austrian Audio Hi-X55 and X65, and the LCD2 Classic have above average soundstage. The hifi Mandiva has wide soundstage, and the HD800S has super wide soundstage. In my opinion, the Listen Pro has soundstage similar to the NDH20 and ATH M60X. In other words, it is below average. Focal says that the Listen Pro is perfect for mixing and mastering, for hearing your music without coloration, but has a lively sound signature. I think Focal comes close to the mark in describing the Listen sound signature. That is a rare event among audiophile companies. We should break out a bottle of champagne. In my experience, the Listen is close to neutral. The bass is nearly neutral. There seems to be a marginal sub-bass roll-off, but mid-bass is not. Separation between sub-bass and mid-bass is hard to hear, and there's at best average clarity in this region. The mids are slightly forward. Vocals stand 2 steps ahead of instruments. Female artists will receive a marginal emphasis in vocal sibilance and grain. The treble is mostly neutral until the upper treble, where there is a slight emphasis. Clarity and separation in this region is about average. Nothing sounds harsh. The Listen has average detail retrieval and below average soundstage. One way to look at this is to say that the Listen Pro is neutral but with a lively upper treble. Another is to say that it is not bassy enough, or that it is not clear enough, or that it's just the right combination of all the qualities. It all depends on what you are looking for. In my opinion, the Listen Pro is reasonably neutral. It's important we compare products as often as possible. That's the only way to know if we are about to spend money on something unique or throwing money away. Here, we are going to compare the Listen Pro against the Rode NTH100 and the Neumann NDH20. I have extensively discussed the oriolus 4X throughout this video, so that's another item of comparison we have previously covered. For this set of comparisons, I used the stock accessories. I plugged each headphone into my Brooklyn DAC Plus with its dual-channel output. I listened to my test playlist on Amazon Music HD. I tried to volume match. The NTH100 and Listen have slightly differing bass response. The NTH100 has neutral sub-bass, but the Listen has a marginal sub-bass roll-off. The Listen has neutral mid-bass, but the NTH100 has a marginal mid-bass emphasis. The NTH100 has a bit more clarity in this region and slightly more separation between sub-bass and mid-bass. The mids are different. The NTH100 has neutral mids and it does not emphasize vocal sibilance or grain. The Listen is slightly mids forward and does emphasize female vocal sibilance and grain. The vocals are clearer in the mix on the NTH100 and overall separation in this region is more obvious on the NTH100. The treble is slightly different. The Listen is mostly neutral except for a slight upper treble emphasis. The NTH100 is neutral across the treble range. Neither headphone is harsh or piercing even at high volumes. The NTH100 has above average detail retrieval, resulting in 8 to 9 footsteps in my new light test. The NTH100 also has wider soundstage, similar to that of the HD6XX and LCD1. The NDH20 is similar to the Listen. Both headphones have a sub-bass roll-off and the NDH20 appears to be slightly more rolled off. Mid-bass impact is similar, if marginally harder on the Listen. Separation and clarity in this region is similar. The mids are also, well, similar. The NDH20 seems to present vocals a tiny bit closer to the ears compared to the Listen. The Listen has a sibilance emphasis, but the NDH20 has a sibilance de-emphasis. However, both headphones appeared to marginally emphasize vocal grain and in comparable ways. Clarity in this region is hard to distinguish between the two. The treble is a bit different between these two headphones. The Listen has mostly neutral rendition until the upper treble, where there's a slight emphasis. The NDH20 has a marginal emphasis starting in the mid-treble. Placement of instruments is similar between these headphones. The Listen has a bit more detail and clarity overall. In my new light test, the NDH20 rendered 5 to 6 clear footsteps. These two headphones have similar soundstage. Hopefully, comparison like these will help you put gear into perspective. While many other people settle for vague, somewhat euphoric descriptions, you, the consumer, need more specific information. To that end, listening for yourself is the only way to know if you will actually like something. Here, all three headphones have different performance. You may love or hate any of these headphones. We have to be careful about hyping a product, particularly when a well-known brand is selling it. How many times have we seen the same type of hyperbolic praise for Audeze, Birdynamic, Focal, or other similar companies? When marketing or reviewers promise all the detail or amazing natural tonality or any other such guff, the red lights in your mind should start flashing. Nothing is as perfect as some people claim. When we look at the Listen Professional, we're greeted by a copious amount of marketing nonsense. While there are aspects about this headphone which are quite good, my experience is that the Listen Pro is not nearly as amazing as Focal says. The Listen has a fairly neutral bass, with a marginal sub-bass roll-off. The mids are slightly forward, with an emphasis towards vocal sibilance and grain. The treble has a slight emphasis near the upper treble. The Listen has average detail and below average soundstage. Contrast this with the promises about hearing all the nuanced details and soundstage similar to a semi-open back headphone and hearing a lively sound signature that is also transparent. Then consider the alternatives in the market. If you're looking for a neutral or close to neutral headphone, then you've got some good options. The Rode NTH100, Allo Audio S4X, Avantone Planar, Beyerdynamic DT700 Pro, and the One Audio Monitor 60 are just a few examples. I think that the Listen Pro does generally fall in line with neutral presentation and can be lumped among these other headphones I mentioned. Your budget, aesthetic preferences, availability of the product, and brand loyalty come into play. So just because the Monitor 60 is a fairly neutral headphone at a cheap price doesn't mean that's the only headphone you should consider. Ultimately, the decision to buy one headphone over another is not really a simple binary choice. I'm sure there are competing factors only you are aware of. Having said that, is the Listen Pro value at around $300? Yes, I think you can make that argument. It offers enough in the build, accessories, and performance to legitimize its price tag. You may not like what this headphone has to offer. You might hate the looks, the clamping force, sound signature, or the price tag. Or you might find that this headphone is exactly what you've been hoping for. The decision is one you have to make after sober reflection. And the Listen Pro is at least worth considering among the rest.